Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Kwanzaa, Happy everything. Okay, it's that holiday season, so we're all amidst in the holidays doing our thing. I like Reverend Tony was saying earlier, I'm starting to, at work, I'm off work for a couple weeks, so now I've been contacting friends and writing cards and doing all that. So however you celebrate the holidays, do it with love and peace in your heart. Last night I watched The Christmas Carol, which is one of the things that I like to do around the holidays, and it was the George C. Scott version. I really am looking for I want to get the old, there's a 1930s version, which is my favorite. It's one of the originals. I remember watching it as a kid, so I'm going to get that one before the holidays over. Sing the Christmas Carol. It's a play. Yeah, based on Charles Dickens' book, kind of novella, I believe. So, okay. So my talk for today is titled, "We Are Creatures of the Dark Who Bring the Light." Ooh, isn't that pretty cool? Creatures of the dark who bring the light. What am I talking about? Seems to be a paradox. Okay? So I thought, okay, since I'm going to talk in paradoxical terms today, I should define it. This is what the dictionary says about a paradox. It's a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated, may be explained as being true. So it's interesting. So here we are in this season, this winter season. And the winter is oftentimes associated in many parts of the world, although we here in California kind of escape the coldest parts. It still gets colder. But it's less light, it's cold, it's dark. People often spend more time sleeping, more time inside, more time perhaps in introspection. Now, it's interesting to me, and here's the paradox, that all throughout human civilization, there's also been this desire for a holiday. And it's often associated with the season often associated with lights in some way. Now, of course, we know, we've talked about this many times here at the Community Miracle Center, there's Hanukkah, right? Which is symbolic of the candles, and there wasn't enough oil to keep the candles lit, yet somehow they stayed lit for the time that they needed, so bringing the light to the darkness. We, of course, have the birth of Jesus is celebrated on that day, December 25th, it's coming up. And of course, Jesus is bringing the light to the world, right? His message, his word, that we are all one, that we are divine. But there's also many others, and I just researched a few of them. There in Scandinavia, there is Saint Lucia, and she is the goddess of light, and it's celebrated with candles. In Egypt, they celebrate Horus, the Egyptian son of the god. So now we're moving from Europe to the Middle East. In Japan, there is the goddess of the sun, Amaterasu. And in India, there is the queen of heaven, Saraswati, who is the queen of heaven, and that's celebrated at this time. So there's something in our collective consciousness, right? Course in Miracles tells us that we are all one. And kind of maybe like Carl Jung used to say, that there's this collective unconscious. So people who seem so diverse, all across the world, in all different geographies, separate from one another, had this desire that in the darkest time of the year to bring the light, to seek and search for the light. Here's what the Course in Miracles said, which Reverend Steve read so well today. When you wander, you but undertake a journey that is not real. And so the wandering is sometimes the choice we make to go into those thoughts of darkness. And so I had this experience recently, it was around late November, early December, where I had this week where I was besieged by the darkness. Everything was it was cold, I was sleeping more, I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, and usually, usually I'm usually pretty much like, oh, I'm up, and yeah, I'm a little groggy, get my coffee, and I didn't want to, I was staying in bed till the last minute. But we're Course in Miracles students, right? And so what were my thoughts at that time? And here at the Miracle Center, we share honestly what our thoughts are. So I was kind of besieged with some dark thoughts. I had these dark companions. It seemed like they were coming every morning. And they were all related to death, And what was happening was I was getting these thoughts about, why get up? You're going to die anyway. Right? It was the thought that I was having. And it was saying, what are you going to do? You don't own your own home, and you're not that successful. And what are you going to do when you get older? You're not going to have enough money. You may not have a place to live. Reverend Tony, please live long. What's it going to be like? And this was really dark thoughts. Like there's this, I guess, I've heard other people talk about this where there's that fear of dying. I think part of it is, we're going to die alone, or we're going to die a painful death. So I was having these dark thoughts, like for several days. And so it was really, really kind of challenging. I was wondering what the heck is going on with that. But then I realized that the lesson I received from this was to acknowledge this. That we are creatures of the dark. Like we did make a decision to come into this world. I'm of the ilk that believes we made this decision, the separation, the tiny mad idea, to come here, and we manifested this world where it appears that we, lay our bodies aside, that we die. It appears that we suffer. Because we have these thoughts of separation. It appears that we, attack our brothers and sisters. And it appears that when we're not above the battlefield, as the Course says, that we're on the battlefield, that we're constantly seeking, that we're kind of constantly attacking, and so on and so forth. And so that was the lesson for me. The lesson that I got is that, sometimes we're going to have in this season, right, of darkness, we're going to have the dark thoughts. Now, I think the important thing is, as A Course in Miracles students, is how do we respond to, as the Course says, the dark companions, the dark way, that are all illusions. It's interesting. This week in our Thursday night class, we were reading the beginning of chapter 8 in the original edition. And there's a quote, and it says, "The ego's voice is an hallucination." Now, folks, where else are you going to get a spiritual book that is that clear about the ego, right? It just says it's a hallucination. So anytime that we're judging, we're listening to a hallucination. Anytime that we're attacking another person, including El Presidente at the moment, it is a hallucination, right? Anytime that we are experiencing thoughts of death, that's it. It's an hallucination. Death is not laying our body aside, right? It is a transition to another state of being, but it is not the end of our existence, of our awareness. And that's what this Course in Miracles brings to us during this season. So what's the purpose then? Like, what is the purpose of these dark thoughts that sometimes come to us? And I think what it is like, it's, that metaphor that we sometimes hear about people that, are spiritual seekers, is that the onion is peeled, right? I don't remember having these kinds of dark thoughts before, and I was pretty freaked out by them, But what it brought back to me was this idea that we are going to have experiences that still challenge us. even though intellectually we know the truth, right? We all know intellectually that we are an expression of God. We can all sit here and we can all say, hey, you know, I'm eternal, God, this what life is an illusion. Even when the body suffers, I can heal my mind, and so on and so forth. So we know this. But at the same time, we still sometimes have these dark companions that come to us. You know? It's like the Russell Crowe movie that it was referred to as A Beautiful Mind, thank you, Reverend Rudy, where he had hallucinations. Really, like much of the movie is about his hallucinations. And what happened as he healed throughout the movie is that it's not that he didn't have the hallucinations anymore. He just did not buy into them anymore. He began to understand that they were not real. And that's what we do, right, as we become Course in Miracles students. You know, the thoughts that I was having earlier in that time, you know, could have been thoughts for, you know, I was fortunate, right? I'm a Course in Miracles student. I knew there was a miracle waiting for me, you know, and I was able to pray about it, talk about it, you know, with folks and all that kind of stuff. So I had a process, you know, so we're really lucky in that way. Now, there are other darknesses, too, that we all experience. Recently, what I have experienced in my own mind is something related to what we call the authority problem. Okay? Now, if, you know, many of us have been studying Course in Miracles, so we're aware of this, but essentially, what the Course in Miracles teaches us about the authority problem is that from the very beginning, it's a problem of authorship. In other words, who gave life? So at the very beginning, you know, we had this amazing existence. We can't even describe it in words. You know, we're in, if you want, heaven, extensions of God, love. And then we have the tiny mad idea creeps in about separation and sin and guilt. And in the moment of pride, we choose against, right, our Creator, and we separate. And so since then, in this world, all of us are subject to some type of authority, aren't we? Right? We're all subject to some type of authority. We project it could be our parents, it could be the government, it could be the Illuminati, you know, whatever it is, the Masons, I don't know, whoever it is in your life that you have authority problems with. All right, some organization. It could be a boss. It could even be an older brother or sister, right? Sometimes we have these things. And I've realized this. I changed jobs this year at my workplace. And my previous job, I was an authority. I had an authority. I had a position in department head. And I had oftentimes, I was struggling with the bureaucrats that are above me, the members of the special ed department or of the San Francisco Unified School District, you know, and a lot of it was over what I felt were unreasonable work demands upon myself and other members of the department, limited resources for the students that I was working for, bureaucratic paperwork, like why are we doing all this paperwork, you know, and it was mostly for legal reasons. And so, you know, a lot of my time was spent in that, and I was, you know, I had judgments, you know, I had darkness, you know, about this. And so I did that. So, you know, this year, I left that position, and I've been reflecting upon my own experience with that, and I realized, hey, this is the authority problem, you know? Because, why is it the authority problem? Well, it's because part of me thinks I could do it better, you know? Part of me thinks that, you know, I could be a better leader. And you know, that may be true, right? That may all be true about my perspective and things like that. But on the bigger issue is where's the healing, right? I'm recognizing this. And then I had this experience where I'm now working with an administrator, and I bring my concerns sometimes about different challenges we have at our work site. And you know what he's told me is, he said, you know what, Peter? He said that all my supervisors are working all the time. you know. They're under the same thing. The state, we work for the California Department of Education, right? They provide our funding, the state provides our funding. So he was saying, you know, like they work all the time. They're under too much paperwork. They have unreasonable demands on them, you know? And so it was like, oh, you know, like I've started to get this idea of the authority problem. Like in my mind, before this, I never had an administrator explain their perspective. Now they might get mad at me. I had that happen. And I had them not respond to me. And you know, I had all kinds of things, and sometimes respond to me and you know, whatever, you know, all these kinds of different experiences. But then I had someone who who I respected, who kind of just said this other perspective. And so I thought to myself, there's the healing, right? There's the healing. Like, you know, here I am judging them, and yet they're doing this. Now, so where is the paradox in all this is the self-contradictory experience, right? Here I am in a position of leadership at some point in time, realizing that, hey, my students aren't getting what I need, they need, I'm working too hard, everyone's working too hard, why is this happening? They should be doing a better job. And they're having the same kind of experience that I'm having, you know? So here it shifts. And here we are, kind of in this darkness at times. And at the same time, we have to look at it a little differently. You know, I was thinking about this whole idea of the authority problem, and I saw Garrick, who is one of our members here at the Community Miracle Center. He actually shared it on his Facebook post this week, and I thought he really got it. You know, like this whole authority problem. And I was thinking of it because he commented about, I think his implication was about President Trump. And you know, and part of it is like, okay, so you know, Trump chose to be the president. So you choose to be the president, and a lot of us feel entitled to blame the president for decisions that the president makes, right? It's kind of easy to do, and you know, he lends himself to a lot of that critique. But at the same time, we do that because we don't want to take responsibility. We just want to blame, right? Whoever it may be in a position of leadership. It doesn't have to be president. It could be in your family. It could be in your friend group, right? It could be in your church organization. And we do that so that we don't have to take responsibility. So we don't have to lead, what Garrick's post said, so we don't have to lead with love. So it's a way for us to absolve our responsibility. So the true way that we lead and that we practice the authority from a Course in Miracles perspective is to accept our leadership, right? We don't need a title. And our leadership is just really showing up and be willing to heal, to be the bringers of the light. It's really to deny the dark companions, whether they be friend or foe, whether they be thoughts or manifestations of people or situations, whatever it might be, right? It's just like Russell Crowe, right? Where you see them, you don't attach to them, you don't acknowledge them. Yes, we have experiences of darkness, but we don't have to buy into them. Course in Miracles says this: the bleak little world will vanish into nothingness, and your heart will be so filled with joy that it will leap into heaven and into the presence of God. And so for this holiday season and for this coming new year, let us all acknowledge the light, call to the light, and let us bring the spirit of this season into our lives. And that's my talk for today.